It's another one of these topics relating to game developers as well as plenty of other folks in non-game development stuff, but today's topic has to do with paying attention more to who's in our audience than to how many there are. That the size of the audience is often what people focus on because those numbers are so quantifiable, but really what's far more important is consideration for who's making up those numbers. And this isn't some sort of elitist thing. This is just about figuring out what kind of message you're putting out there, what sort of material you're trying to develop, if you're building a game, who your audience might be. Because you put the wrong thing in front of the wrong kind of audience, or the wrong thing for a given audience in front of them, it backfires, no matter if it might be the right thing for somebody else. And so, one thing that might be just sort of the simplest place to start at this is that, we're digital media, modern internet, is set up in a way we're getting continuous, very granular feedback. Upvotes, downvotes, likes, dislikes, comments that are replying in negative ways or retweets or otherwise. And sometimes silence is what we're met with. And when I post on a message on Twitter, and I kind of, keep an eye like anybody does on how's it doing, there's sort of two different things that give me a sense that it succeeded, that it's doing well, something I should have said. One is if it's getting, a bunch of retweets or comments or activity, I'm like, oh, likes, and it seems like that says something. But equally important, if not in some cases maybe more important, is that if a few people whose opinions I hold in high regard, whose work I admire, who people I've considered role models, whether they're sort of intellectual educators, whether they're very pragmatic business industry folks, whether they're just friends of mine who I, like I say, admire, think are doing good things in the world, and if they like or retweet something, that counts to me way more, right, than if 300 people I've never heard of do. Because I know something about whose opinion is being reflected in that preference. And so often what I think happens is we focus so exclusively on growing the numbers without a regard for, but how are we growing them? Who are those people? What are they looking for out of it? As we very quickly begin to lose control of our message, lose control of our purpose in doing it. This is one of the things I think has actually polluted, in many ways, the kind of content we see from some leading people on a number of platforms, sometimes leading YouTubers, sometimes social media types, etc., who will say and do things because they've been sort of trained by their audience that that's what that audience wants, without having been careful about how they formed that audience. There's an old expression from Henry David Thoreau and Walden that men are not so much the keepers of herds as herds are the keepers of men. Or, of course, in today's conversation, that a content creator isn't so much the keeper of fans or followers, or whatever term we use, as those people out there who are receiving the content are in a way in control of, or certainly influential to, potentially, the person producing the content. Right? And so that's something that when we figure out, okay, how are people finding their way to our channel? What sort of people stick around? When people tell me, like, obviously, my speed programming videos do much better in numbers than my other videos, but the percentage of those people who are really about doing something, who are really about making something, who are really about either already doing it or made up their mind, committed to learning how to do it, is not nearly as good as the attendance, the people who view and like and respond well to the other videos, which are about productivity, which are about getting ourselves to do things, which are about just doing stuff, keeping each other, in some cases, like the previous video, which is weirdly, obviously not doing as well as others, which are in the same series, with the same format, same style, in a way that, like, really, those videos are all about people who are really looking for productivity, to do something, to accept that, like, okay, well, we can set aside this time, and we can use it to move ourselves forward. Because what I want an audience of people who are really moving themselves forward, who are doing their stuff. And I don't know, I think that there's this sort of, almost a sort of meta narrative going on, or I think some of the negative response to it had to do with that it was another day in the park, doing it again. And that's part of the message. That's part of the thing, right? I mean, there's a lot of repetition to getting results. There's a lot of doing the same kind of thing in the same kind of way. I think Austin Kleon in Steal This Book refers to it as be boring so your work can be interesting. And in so many people's lives, I think they're making the mistake that their only repetition is what's forced upon them by a boss, by a professor, by someone outside holding them accountable to it. And in their own lives, they want novelty. And the way they get that novelty is by just being hungry for something different, for something new, for something else. And it's one thing to get a little bit of occasional relief from that. It's a whole other to lose track of that in their own life. If they're not having some repetition of not being somewhere more interesting, not being somewhere different, not doing something wildly unusual, but is putting in that time, doing the things that add up, That's where the accomplishments arise out of. That's where skills get differentiated. That's where portfolios begin to stand out. That's where people's situation 5 years from now is better instead of the same or worse than where it was today. And so, you know, that to me, I actually like if I can come up with kinds of videos that repel certain types of audience. That's long-term in my interest, because what I don't want to do is accumulate viewers from the viral videos who then aren't really about doing things. Again, there's an element of entertainment is good and is fine and is putting on an entertaining message, but still at the end of the day, it's really about, okay, well, who from that crowd is really serious about doing some stuff, right? Making some things, picking up some skills, improving themselves. And so, you know, high level, it's all to do with paying attention to who is in our audience. That in some cases, an audience might appear to stay the same for a while. But if what's really going on is you're swapping people out of your audience, you know, you're getting some people unfollow people, and people unfollow you on Twitter, so different people follow you. People unfriend you on Facebook, different people friend you. Even if the numbers are stable, if what's happening is that the composition of that audience is improving in terms of who you want to reach, the kind of people you want holding you accountable, the kind of people you want listening, giving you feedback, then that's still beneficial. Way more beneficial than the numbers just going up, but diluting the kind of people that you're trying to reach out there. You know, I think one last kind of lens on this sort of thing comes down to where growing up, my mom was very adamant as one of these kind of parents, and parents' attitudes are very different about these things, where she paid attention to the kind of people that my brother and I were hanging out with, in terms of knowing that if we were around those people, things about them, their behavior, their attitudes, their interests, their things would rub off on us. And that while we had plenty of leeway, and she wasn't like hyper too deep in our lives in a sort of unfair way, especially in hindsight, we can very well see where she kind of helped steer us clear of some trouble or some missed opportunities that would have happened as a result of people whose lives maybe weren't on a good track in a way that we were in no position to have helped, but that at best would have pulled us that direction too, would have affected our habits maybe more so than we could have had a positive influence or whatever. And these are things we still have to consider as adults, right? In terms of the people we hang around. This is something that they iterate or emphasize a bunch at business seminars, through coaching programs, through all kinds of productivity books, etc. This idea that we become in part who we hang out with, that like the 5 or 6 people we're really around and interacting with, we become more and more like them. And this affects all kinds of areas of our lives, socially, financially, professionally, what we consider our norms for what's okay, what we consider is or isn't a funny joke, what we consider is or isn't something that's a valid use of the limited flexible time that we have in our lives. And so I guess what I'm trying to do here is try to really zoom out from that and say, while we obviously, I think all of us kind of have a gist, and we know that that's true about the coworkers we are around, the neighbors we interact with, the friends that we make a point of having discussions with. That's equally true for the kind of online following, fan base, reach, whatever it is that you're developing, because those are also people who are going to be giving you the feedback of more like this, less like that, and that making sure that that's something you're paying attention to. Who's in that crowd? Because it'll affect you. It'll change you if you're not careful. So anyway, that's it for the day. Thanks always for tuning in. Have another video fun tomorrow. Bye for now.